Before we talk about your company here today, I want to talk about what you found. You published a piece in June that mapped an entire underground economy selling stolen AI tokens. Start at the beginning. How did you end up on a Chinese forum reading operators describe their business?
Yeah, so it all started from, I guess, my own experience. I previously worked on an AI gateway and I kept getting paged for abuse. It's a Saturday night, I'm out to dinner with my wife, and we get a Slack message, we're getting hit for $60,000. Go home, you merge like a fix, it goes away for like a week, and then it comes back again and again and again. And it's like, okay, I need to start looking into this. And I started talking to friends. I was like, hey, are you seeing the same things? And I was pretty shocked at, I guess, the scale of it. Like, I would talk to friends who were seeing like over $1 million in token fraud per day, others who were seeing like 10 million a month. And at this point, I realized that this had to be more than just like individual bad actors. And what I would come to find was that there was essentially an entire kind of underground market that was facilitating the trade of stolen tokens.
You said 1 million in one day in token fraud you'd see?
Yeah, I've seen, I think the worst I saw was $10 million in 48 hours. That was actually the breaking point. I quit my job like a few days after that because I was like, this is something that I need to solve. Like for my own sanity, for friends, like it's rare to see a problem like this and something that like I was like passionate about, was excited to solve, and that like frankly needs to be solved.
And when you look at this space, like when I was doing my research, and you and I talked a little bit about this before the recording, there's not much on this on what you're on your building and what you're solving. So I was very excited to chat with you here today about it. So what I would love to kind of do, if it's cool with you, is explain the market to me and the audience. Like we've never thought about this. There's a supply chain. Who's at the top? Who's in the middle? Who's actually buying?
Yeah, so to like take a step back, I guess, what do I exactly do I mean by stolen tokens? Essentially, there are hundreds of websites out there getting like millions or tens of millions of visitors a month, depending on the site, where you can go buy Anthropic, OpenAI, DeepSeek, whoever you want for up to 98% off. And I guess what I was a victim of was kind of like the supply side of that market. Like they need a way to essentially get those tokens that they're reselling, and we were a victim of that. And there's like there's multiple layers to it. It's actually a pretty sophisticated market. When I first started looking into this in June, or I guess earlier, like May, early May, there really wasn't much talk of this on the Western internet at all. But what they call themselves relays or transfer stations. And they're the ones that are kind of the marketing arm almost of the token resellers. And there's a lot of like pre-built kind of infrastructure to quickly spin up your own relay so that like there's GitHub repos out there like with one click deploy, and it'll spin you up an entire application where you just load in accounts. It has reseller functionality built in, and then you can essentially like resell inference. And so that's like kind of like the top layer, I guess. There's like all of these sites that are kind of like lead gen marketing. There's also like kind of surrounding this, there's affiliate sites that get paid to send referrals to those sites. There is like price comparison websites. There's sites that do like model verification for these sites to make sure they're, actually selling you the model they say they are. And then I guess beneath that is the account pools. And so there's a bunch of sites out there that facilitate in the trading of accounts. What do I mean by that? You can go out and buy Anthropic accounts, OpenAI accounts, like name any app you can think of, and there's probably accounts being traded on one of the marketplaces. And then underneath that is kind of these like KYC verification bypass services that if you're looking to register like a bulk number of accounts and you need to pass like KYC requirements, they'll help you do that, as well as card pools if you're looking to bypass kind of like foreign restrictions foreign restrictions around cards. And then this kind of like all intermingles. So like, some of this is a bit more vertically integrated, like some of the relays, some aren't. And then, so that kind of like maps out the, I guess, like supply side of the market. And the tactics they take to get these tokens, it really differs. Like they're pretty clever. It could be, like I said, these like account pools where you get more tokens than what you'd actually be paying for via API. There's free credit, free trial farming. So they sign up a bunch of accounts, take the 5 credits. There's something I'm seeing a lot more of now is the chargeback fraud and the stolen credit card fraud. I think possibly because it's just an easier form of fraud if you have a stolen credit card than existing methods like ecom or marketplace card cycling. It's much easier to kind of perform the token reselling. Any type of like open inference is also another source that they will supply from or get supply from. So if you've seen like a chat bot on some website, they'll figure out how to proxy traffic through that and resell that inference. And then, yeah, that kind of like maps out, I guess, like the supply side of the market. And then on the demand side, you have kind of a mixture of people and consumers. So at the most basic level, you have people like looking to just get around geo restrictions. So like maybe they can't sign up from their own country, or the model labs have restricted that country's access and they just want to use the models. And so they'll do what they can to kind of get around those restrictions. You also just have consumers looking for cheap tokens, like they don't want to pay list price. You have actual businesses I've seen as well where they're running like full kind of SaaS style applications based on these tokens and are just, want to beat their competitors on price. And then there's some level of this that's like, I guess, model distillation. So companies looking to kind of like hide their footprint when distilling like the frontier models. And so that kind of like, I guess, was a long-winded way of mapping out both the supply side and the demand side of the market.
What's the? I mean, obviously, this was bad enough that you're like, I want to go and build a solution. What, like, what's the penalty for any of these? I guess you can call them bad actors, consumers, whatever you want to call them, for like for the ones that are selling and for the ones that are using it, because it is in some way fraud, right? Like you're not supposed to be using these tokens that you did not pay fair value for. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't want to put words in
Yeah.
your mouth, but I'd be curious. Like, what are they doing? Do they just ban your account if they find out you're using these discounted tokens?
Yeah. So frankly, I don't think there's not really much they can do more than just ban the account. It's not really, these aren't like mainly being run by US citizens from what I can tell. And so, yeah, the most that typically happens is the account gets banned, the relay sources some new accounts, some new supply side for the tokens, and the process repeats itself. It's kind of like a cat and mouse game.
By the way, the fact that basically the steepest penalty is your account gets banned makes me like what you're building even more.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. So one of the things, like you said, you had the number that made you want to quit. What were some of the other factors that led up to beyond seeing these stats? You're a serial entrepreneur. This is not your first rodeo, right? You're a person when every company you've started solved a problem you were facing. What goes into deciding what your next business is going to be beyond just the statistic that you told about earlier.
Yeah, I really wanted to be thoughtful about the next company I worked on. It's kind of funny, like over my life, how I've like my thinking has changed about the importance of the idea. Like for the longest time, I thought, it's all execution. That's like the most important thing. And while I do think that's important, having a good idea, frankly, makes things a lot easier. Like you don't necessarily have to nail the execution as much if there's a strong pull. Like if people really need what you're offering, you can make a few more mistakes along the way and still be okay. And the core things, I guess, I was really looking for in the next thing I wanted to start was I wanted to find an initial, I guess, like subset of people where this was like a hair on fire problem that they were dealing with that they couldn't find a solution for. They were building something in house maybe, but like they had tried a bunch of things and nothing had really solved the problem. And so that stood out for me for this mainly because I had tried a bunch of solutions and none of them really solved the problem. It just kept coming back and I was getting tired of dealing with it. And I was almost at the point where like we would have paid for something. If somebody came and was like, hey, let me solve this for you, we would have been pretty happy. So I think that was like a pretty important piece of it. The other was I thought that there was a great story to be told here. And I think that's really important when I guess like building a company is a lot of building in the beginning is kind of like telling your story, like whether that's like fundraising, talking to customers, writing about the product. Everything is a bit easier if you have like a compelling story around what you're kind of talking about. And I thought that that was also here, that there was essentially like this underground market that I'd kind of stumbled upon. And I thought, it's compelling to me. Like I found myself like in these forums late at night, these WeChat groups, and I couldn't get enough of it. And, I thought, I don't think anybody else will either. Like people are going to want to know about this. And so I think that was kind of like the next biggest thing. And then the third, I guess, is, startups are a long term commitment. You're getting ready to dedicate a large portion of your life to something. So it has to be something at the very least that you care somewhat about. Does it get you excited? You have to be able to wake up in the morning and like look forward to what you're kind of working on or the problem you're solving. Yeah, I was excited about the problem. It was interesting to me. It was something that I had dealt with, my friends had dealt with, and I felt good about trying to solve this.
I want to go back to something you mentioned, through your journey and discovering this opportunity. You would go into these forums. As I was researching you, there was a little bit about the story of the discovering of these forums. And I want to talk about how you would actually email the brokers, right? And then you also listed your own credits for sale just to see the other side of the funnel. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think part of this is like it's kind of funny, I guess. There's a little bit of like investigative, almost research. Because like I said, it's also new that in order to understand how this really works, I kind of needed to like stick my neck out a bit. And so yeah, I talked to a bunch of like friends who kind of like were starting to see this, and they had forwarded me emails of people trying to sell them credits at like a steep discount. And I don't know, essentially started emailing them all. Like I got on Telegram and all of these like kind of like messaging platforms and just started reaching out. And yeah, the numbers were shocking. Like I had someone offer me 3 million a month in OpenAI inference, assuming stolen somehow, like 60% off. So they're doing something to get those discounts. And part of that's just really trying to understand the motivations and the methods of kind of the supply side of the market. Like, how is this being facilitated? Who are the players? How do they think? What are they doing? And the only way to really figure that out is by talking to them.
as you are like, are you? I'm assuming you're having some real fun too when you're doing this. When
Yeah.
you're chatting with these people, you're in Telegram. Did everyone seem pretty like it's just another business though when they're interacting with you and having these conversations like it was no big deal?
Yeah, frankly, yeah, that's kind of how it feels. It's just like I'm another customer, you know. Here's our rates, let you know, like here's how you integrate. I mean, some of these services offer like invoicing, net 30 payments, like they've got enterprise pages for if you're like a larger company and you want to work with them, like what's the best way to do that? And so, you know, they've got all of the typical motions you'd expect from a SaaS startup.
As you were doing your research, obviously you started building your initial like assumptions, right, and where you want to go with this product. Was there anything as you kind of went more down the rabbit hole that surprised you the most?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing has always been the scale. I think that was like the most shocking to start was like when I started seeing the numbers of how bad this was, how popular these sites were, how many visitors they were getting. Those were all kind of like big aha moments for me. Also, the breadth. Like a lot of companies I talked to were feeling this, and it didn't. It could have been a small company. It could be a large enterprise. It didn't almost like matter like the shape of that organization. Most were feeling it in some way if they'd really started looking into the data. So a lot of times, it's for a while everyone's been kind of token maxing, and so they weren't looking to the data. And I think now that like the market is starting to turn a little bit, and people are starting to ask questions like, well, how are our tokens being used? Like, are we getting benefits out of this? What does spend look like? I think more and more of this is being uncovered.
What are your thoughts on, these frontier models versus just what you also hear a lot of people talking about now, just running models privately? Obviously, for what you're building, those frontier models are of the utmost importance. But I am curious, just from your technical background, you know, what are you seeing when it comes to these frontier models? What are your thoughts on how the private models have really stepped it up over the last few months? Just kind of as a separate side note.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a few interesting things here. The first is that I actually think part of the fraud is almost less about the model. Some of it
Hmm.
matters specifically for the distillation, but it's really more about how easy, specifically on like the stolen credit card front, how easy is it to turn that into a dollar? And so I don't even know that what the input is matters as much as the fact that it's very easy to exchange this unit for some form of currency. That being said, like the frontier models are definitely what's being, they have the biggest targets on their back. Like they're being hit the hardest by this. And kind of downstream of that, like why do I think not all, but some of these other open source models have caught up so quickly? Well, it's distillation through services like kind of these relays. And it's funny, like seeing people, I don't know, in the press, and they're like, there's no distillation happening. And you can go to any of these forums, and they're very openly talking about how much money they're making selling to these companies doing the distillation. And it's very obviously happening. If you just spend a little bit of time doing research on like the market. And yeah, like I think that that is a large reason why they've been able to catch up so quickly.
Something I want to go back to, as I was doing this research, you described something called denial of wallet, where there's no financial motive at all. Someone is just burning your money essentially. So that would suggest that every company that shipped an AI feature also shipped a business model where a stranger can spend the cash. Is that a temporary artifact of how fast everyone moved, or is it structural?
I think it's an interesting change almost in kind of like the structure of how applications are being built. That was kind of very wordy. So let me like break down what I actually mean. We've never really had like an HTTP call that could cost, you know, 30 cents, a dollar or more. And now we do. Now you can have a user sign up for your app and like hit some endpoint that maybe it generates an image or I don't know, there's some inference kind of backing it and they can cause like financial harm, right? Where they're actually spending your money. Um, because like for a typical SaaS application, like, you know, somebody spins up a bunch of free accounts, who cares? Like it's not the end of the world. But now they can spin up a bunch of free accounts and maybe you give them like 5 chats free or something, or you have some AI feature bundled in, uh, and they just want to hammer that AI feature because they don't like you. And yeah, I've seen stories of this where a friend ended up on some forum and they didn't like him for whatever reason. And they put a bunch of scripts together to spin up a bunch of accounts and essentially just like drain his token spend for no real reason other than they just didn't like him. Similar to like a DDoS attack where somebody doesn't like you and they want to take down your site just because they're kind of an asshole. But for this time, there's like actual dollars tied to it.
Okay, so you just brought up something. So, in the past, a lot of these companies, you'd have to worry about, okay, a DDoS attack. But like you were saying, that would be more a DDoS, obviously not good, but it would end up being more of an inconvenience to have to get everything
Yeah.
back. Now we're talking real dollars at stake. So this really should be a problem that more people are talking about across the board, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with DDoS, you know, they take down your site. There's, you know, some reputational problems with that. But even for the most part, people are kind of understanding. Like, hey, we got DDoS. Like, your customers are going to be like, "Ah," they're going to feel bad a little bit. But with, yeah, the denial of wallet attacks, it's an actual dollar. Like, if they figure out what that inference endpoint is, you know, maybe you're a typical SaaS app, but somewhere in your application, there is a way to interface with AI. If somebody figures that out and they figure out how to set up enough accounts or they figure out how to get to that endpoint, they can hit you for real dollars. Yeah,
And a lot of them.
it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's not cheap either. And yeah, I think it's something that a lot more companies should be thinking about. Like just putting in even the, you know, the basics like tracking, like when I talk to a lot of people about this, it's, you know, just helping them like figure out like how would you know if this was happening? What are the bare minimum steps you can take to like shut things off if it is happening? It's like I said, I've seen stories where larger organizations are getting hit for 7 figures before they actually notice.
Act like I'm a potential customer and you're pitching Vectoral. Like, what is your pitch? How does that work? And I guess what does a core buyer look like today, or
Yeah,
will look like?
I'll put my sales hat on.
Okay.
Very different hat. I, although frankly, a lot of what I do now is like a lot of it's just kind of explaining the problem and talking people through like what I've seen work, what doesn't work, what are the basic steps they can take. But at our core, what we've kind of built is like a classification model that ingests a lot of signals that we've seen kind of correlate with this type of abuse, and we have some like labeled kind of data of the abuse. And from there, we built out like a classification model that can predict how likely it is that the person or like that individual inference request is abusive. And I think what was core for us was like you need to look at a lot of different signals. And maybe that's why there wasn't like a kind of out of the box solution for all of this when I first started looking into it, because you need to look at information on registration. Like you need to have an idea of like who's signing up, why, location, kind of all of the metadata there. You need to have a lot of data about like the browser being used. Most client side detection can be bypassed, but it's like a good kind of additional layer. And then you need another kind of set of kind of events that need to be collected from the inference request itself. And if you take all of those, like kind of every single step of that user's journey to get to the actual inference request, you can build essentially a model of who that person is, how they're using the application, and we use that to inform, you know, is this person potentially abusing the system?
As like Anthropic and others continue like rolling out identity verification, again, back to my research, you've said the abuse will not disappear, it'll just move. Can you give me a specific prediction 12 months from now? What's the fraud? Like, what is the fraud that doesn't have a name yet?
The what is the I guess like next form of token fraud? I think we're
Yeah.
going to kind of see. So to your earlier point, like yeah, I think this moves to the application layer next. That's my hunch. Is that Anthropic starts rolling out more KYC controls, identity verification. Um, the demand side of the market will still be there. And so people will figure out a way to find that supply. And it's going to be less sophisticated organizations or people who haven't had to deal with this yet. I think they're going to be kind of the next target down the line. My other hunch is that like the frontier model labs are always going to be dealing with this in some sense. Like when Anthropic rolled out KYC, there's listings up for KYC bypass within like a day. There's a bunch of ways to get that bypassed, and there's actually entire identity providers that like facilitate these KYC control passes. But it's going to push a lot of this down market if it's easier. Like if it's an easier path for them is to just hit the application layer, that's what they're going to do. And so I think we'll see that in the short term. I'm starting kind of already to see that. I think we're going to see more of the credit card fraud move from existing kind of vectors to tokens. It's just like the market's newer. Companies don't have the like kind of required checks set up yet to really stop this type of abuse. The actors are very sophisticated. And as like an application, like if you get a chargeback, even if you win that chargeback, you still get charged a fee on it. And so like you're at the end of the day, you're still losing money. And so that's I guess what I think of in the short term. In the long term, I almost think of what we're seeing right now is token fraud or inference fraud. I think long term we're going to see almost like fraud for agents, which I think is different than like agentic fraud. Like not agents performing fraud, but fraud being pushed onto agents. So your agent, you set up some agent to do something, somebody hijacks that agent, uses all your money, and does something completely different that they want to do. Like when I think about how the cybersecurity attacks of the future are going to happen, I think it's going to be like hijacking agents to do their dirty work, like to hide their tracks essentially. And so I think that's what we see long term is like fraud move to kind of like agent hijacking, like people taking your agent to do, what they want.
And, and that's part of why it's so important that as an industry we just keep moving forward, right? Like I think everyone, every entrepreneur, the technical community, they understand this, but when you look at the focus on America, but like the Americans today that are anti-AI, and they want to I keep hearing this now, how there's talks within the government about installing like the FDA for reviewing AI models and things like that. I don't think people that are not on top of the tech and learning realize how dangerous it would be if we had to slow down our progress here while every other country like China, right, will continue um, moving forward. It's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because even when if there's jobs lost, you're kind of because of all the other countries and what's happening and the progress at how fast these technologies are growing, you kind of have to keep growing versus ever pausing. And so it's just a wild time
Yeah.
that we live in right now.
Yeah, totally. I think we're really at there is like some level of like if like we want to be at the frontier of this new technology, we just have to move quickly. Um, like I said earlier, I don't think the labs have done a great job in press, and like they've certainly not, made themselves out to be the good guys here. But I do believe that it's core to the future of our country for like, you know, the future generations of America that we are at the forefront of this. And I don't really buy that having some regulated thing that looks at models is going to safeguard us from what's possible here. Like I think that that's kind of a pipe dream and that we need to let the market evolve a bit before we decide, you know, what that should look like. Like I don't think we need to rush into that. I think we should be thoughtful about how this industry looks in, 5 to 10 years. And for now, let it keep rapidly evolving. And I'm also like not personally, like I don't buy the whole AI is going to take all jobs. I think jobs will change, but people are going to want to continue working and organizations are going to want to continue hiring people. Like there's going to be shifts in the labor market, but long term, I think that, everybody benefits from this.
Before we start to wrap up here, one or two more questions for you. And again, really appreciate your time here today. This has been a fun conversation. Is there anything you can tell us in regards to Vectoral that you're building now that maybe you haven't spoken much about yet or you are about to announce coming up? Anything that you want to say here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We have like a few things, I guess, like a bit under wraps, partially just because like we like to keep kind of how a lot of the detection algorithm works close to our chest, just because like that's kind of our secret sauce. And
Mm-hmm.
if the other side knew of like every signal we looked at, it probably wouldn't be as effective. But I guess like something I'm super excited about is like the scale of like labeled data that we're kind of rolling in now. It's like really made some great improvements to the classification algorithm and kind of how we're thinking about what does trust and safety and abuse look like for an agentic world. And so we've got a lot of really cool things planned around, not just like the token fraud, but abuse against AI and agents more generally. Like, what can we do to help stop that? And more importantly, almost to my earlier point, like, what tools can we give people so that, like, internally at their own organization, they can do their job better to stop this stuff? Like, I think that's core to the whole AI thing. Like, we're giving people tools to do a better job. We're not taking their jobs. We're helping, make their job easier.
Who should reach out to you after they see this? Who do you want to reach out to you?
I think I would say generally, like, I love talking about token fraud. So anybody who's just interested in this space, wants to learn more, I'm always happy to chat. Anybody who wants to solve this, we're hiring. I'd love to talk to you. Anybody who's faced this, I'm happy to share what works or what doesn't. Or anybody who's worried about this, like, I can share what I've seen, how the attack vector works, and what are the bare minimum kind of things you can do to prevent it.